penalize white males that are competent to go run our systems.
Yes, this is an incredible distinction. I'm going to play that again.
Like, people of color are more like stupid?
No,
or like,
of course not.
Right.
I mean, people of color come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that don't prioritize education
so
as much.
How do we fix those socioeconomic statuses?
Right, that's an interesting...
By preserving the system that allows them to get ahead in the first place. The reason why there's hope and an opportunity is because we allow competence-based hierarchies to organize themselves and function such that rewards can be distributed in accordance with a competent contribution. This is why every young person in America who is born poor has a hope of bettering themselves. America has the greatest economic mobility of any country on the planet, and also more economic mobility than any country in the history of civilization. It's the reason we've been able to be so successful in a mere 200 years. It's this marriage of capitalism and the recognition of the individual and all the corresponding freedoms that would go along with that recognition of the individual, and you can think of it as the organizational structure of a psyche. We think of ourselves as individuals first, who can contribute to and shape the world. That wasn't actually the case for most of human history. Your average peasant in the Dark Ages didn't think, I can change the world, because they couldn't, because they lived in a time of feudal despotism. Ironically, the left-wing advocacy would result in a return to that system, where the despotism is defined by an identity attributed through some sort of low IQ, incoherent filter of alleged victimhood, and all competence would be it wouldn't even be a priority, but in some cases it would be actively demonized, because competence reflects the objective world and therefore judges incompetent people.
The U.S. Secret Service, let me just give you one example, okay? So they have less pull-ups, less push-ups, slower mile time.
Pull-ups? Push-ups? Those things are constructs, oppressive constructs. What do you mean? The ability of your pec muscles to contract, therefore imparting force, demonstrating strength? What are you, a bigot? Instead, it should be, oh my gosh, she looks like a boss queen in those dark aviators. Go, queen, oh my gosh. And then we get a point where we see the only Secret Service agent when Donald Trump was, you know what, ducking. She was ducking.
There's a lot of things that benefit from a diverse group of people, both in engineering and medical fields and education and other facets of the systems. And I was just wondering, without affirmative action, how do you think we can bring these people in to bring a variety of opinions?
Yeah, no, I mean,
views?
just have a meritocracy, right? So you have 3 white men around you. You can see 1, 2, 3. So if one supports affirmative, no, it's okay. If one supports affirmative action,
right,
it would mean that you would be okay turning to those 3 men and saying, I deserve the position more than you based on something that doesn't matter more than something that does matter.
I feel like that's one fact.
Okay, so you see this disconnection with reality come in varying levels based on the degeneracy of the female psyche and its possession therein with left-wing ideology, where coherent objective systems themselves don't have to be considered or adhered to. Instead, policy and actually the way you approach problems and ideas is purely based in emotion. This is why when you see Charlie say something that is objectively true, her response is not necessarily. Because actually in her mind, that would be the right response if you don't have to adhere to an objective standard which reflects the world in coherent ways, which of course would include meritocracy. The more I have exposed myself to this degenerate female psychopathology that the left takes advantage of, and I see it manifested over and over again from different sources on the internet, very diverse sources actually. There's a large number of women who actually want to remake all of society in the image of an incoherent ideology based on resentment and emotion. Full stop. This is quite literally a serious threat because these women vote in accordance with remaking the world in the image of an incoherent system based on resentment defined by emotion and the mirage of victimhood. They would rather organize systems based on skin color because it makes them feel better, never mind the fact that that's racist and anti-meritocratic and would result in the decimation of society. I think when Kamala Harris said we need to impose a 25% unrealized tax gain, this happened in the same vein where she didn't even know what she was saying. She didn't even think about how that would cripple the economy and literally obliterate all of enterprise. She just thought we should do that because it remakes the world in the image of rectifying victimhood as a result of masculinity, toxically oppressing society, and women and minorities, or whatever identity you want to claim, being victims and therefore heroes, despite having not earned that status. 90% of the policies the left puts forward are based in this personality of an incompetent female personality, which wants to decimate and eradicate any form of the objective world manifesting itself, which of course would center around enterprise, capitalism, hierarchy, and justly gained status.
Facet of it that we're not also paying attention to is that people that are graduating from the same schools. They're graduating with the same degrees.
With lower test scores, though. Much lower. Every study of affirmative action.
Right, well, that's to be expected, but what's interesting there, I think, is something that most people miss, which is she doesn't care about that because of what she just said. They graduated from the same schools. as far as she's concerned, that is an identity in and of itself. You don't need to go beyond that identity as far as they're concerned, because as long as you can say, I went to Harvard, it doesn't matter that you're 5 times as incompetent as an average Harvard student. This again reflects the symmetry of their ideology. Only the identity matters. Meritocracy is merely a constructed form of oppression that was actually designed to be corrupt and oppressive.
For example, the Harvard case showed that it was nearly 40% lower test scores for people of color versus their white male counterparts and Asian counterparts.
And so how
right, and actually Asians are tremendously discriminated against at Harvard, because if it was truly a meritocratic system, then Harvard would be like 80% Asian. Do I think that should be the case? Yes. And any person that is not possessed by unending resentment to the point of literally advocating for racial discrimination should agree with me.
Some point,
is that like why would that happen? Do you think
why?
It's yeah?
What
causes that? Do you think it's just because
Asians have an average IQ of 102. White people in America have an average IQ of 99 or 100. It's somewhere between that.
People of color are more stupid?
No,
or
of course not.
Right.
I mean, people of color come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that don't prioritize education as
so
much.
how do we
but
fix those socioeconomic statuses?
Right, that's an interesting point. Not should we try to penalize white males that are competent to go run our systems.
Yes, this is an incredible distinction. I'm going to play that again.
People of color are more stupid?
No,
or
of course not.
Right.
I mean, people of color come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that don't prioritize education as much.
So how do we fix those socioeconomic statuses?
Right, that's an interesting...
By preserving the system that allows them to get ahead in the first place. The reason why there's hope and an opportunity is because we allow competence-based hierarchies to organize themselves and function such that rewards can be distributed in accordance with a competent contribution. This is why every young person in America who is born poor has a hope of bettering themselves. America has the greatest economic mobility of any country on the planet, and also more economic mobility than any country in the history of civilization. It's the reason we've been able to be so successful in a mere 200 years. It's this marriage of capitalism and the recognition of the individual and all the corresponding freedoms that would go along with that recognition of the individual, and you can think of it as the organizational structure of a psyche. We think of ourselves as individuals first, who can contribute to and shape the world. That wasn't actually the case for most of human history. Your average peasant in the Dark Ages didn't think, I can change the world, because they couldn't, because they lived in a time of feudal despotism. Ironically, the left-wing advocacy would result in a return to that system, where the despotism is defined by an identity attributed through some sort of low IQ, incoherent filter of alleged victimhood, and all competence would be it wouldn't even be a priority, but in some cases it would be actively demonized, because competence reflects the objective world and therefore judges incompetent people. This is at the crux of why Marxists exist. They're always the most resentful, mentally weak, and deformed people in the world, because really what they're driven by is resentment for that which they aren't.
Interesting point. Not should we try to penalize white males that are competent to go run our systems and our institutions.
Exactly.
So those are two different things. So what we're doing is our institutions are now becoming less excellent. Our country is not working like it used to.
Which would, if fully realized, would result in less hope for marginalized people, because then there wouldn't be a way to get ahead. This is the reason why in Cuba, in every single communist regime, it's always a race to the bottom. It's so simple once you analyze it, but to analyze it, you have to engage in coherence, logic, rationality, the frameworks of objectivity which leftists demonize as patriarchal and toxic.
As we basically told people that are very qualified and very competent that, sorry, we're not going to put a position for you here. For example, the U.S. Secret Service. Let me just give you one example, okay?
This is a good example.
We can all agree that protecting a president, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, is super important, right? But now the Secret Service has said that we want to have 30% of all our agents be women.
Right, and they've done this in the military standards as well, by the way.
Which, by the way,
lowering the standards.
They have lower fitness criteria. So they have less pull-ups, less push-ups, slower mile time.
That's something that's...
Oh, but that's just oppression. Don't worry, I'm gonna play her response, but I just want to say, pull-ups, push-ups, those things are constructs, oppressive constructs. What do you mean? The ability of your pec muscles to contract, therefore imparting force, demonstrating strength? What are you, a bigot? I'm simply vocalizing exactly the way their ideology would sound if accurately stated. They don't even believe in the foundational viewpoint of reality should be objectively reflected. Instead, it should be, oh my gosh, she looks like a boss queen in those dark aviators. Go, queen, oh my gosh. And then we get a point where we see the only Secret Service agent when Donald Trump was, you know what, ducking. She was ducking. And you know what's funny? Is the other female agent that wasn't ducking, she wasn't even tall enough to cover him anyway, because he's 6'2". You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. It's nuts. There are plenty of physical standards which would probably exclude me from things, but do you see me complaining about that? Do you see men complaining? The average guy walking around being like, you know what? I'm not a Navy SEAL. This is a result of me being oppressed. I'm literally oppressed. I'm a victim. Men don't do this because we understand that there is an impetus for us to reflect objective reality, or we're mocked and bullied mercilessly. And you might think that, some people might watch this and say, oh, are you picking on women? No, I'm not. This is the reason why I talk about women having a problem with this, because men don't have this same problem. Very few men would walk around and say, the reason I'm not a Navy SEAL is because I'm a victim, or the reason why I'm not an Olympic athlete is because I'm a victim. Oh my gosh, I'm being oppressed right now. The standards to get into the Olympics? I can run a 14-minute mile. Why aren't they letting me in? I was born this way. The concept of discriminating between better and worse, competent and less competent, stronger, weaker, faster, slower, higher IQ, lower IQ, requires discrimination. We can either have discrimination based on coherence and logic, where people compete as individuals to better themselves, or we can have it on some sort of despotic, arbitrary identity games based on counterfeit victimhood. One sounds way more dystopian than the other, but to losers, basing our systems in competence will always be intolerable, especially to weak losers. They are the agents of chaos. They are the agents of radical tyranny. They are the agents of the Matrix, if you're talking about what Andrew Tate talks about, but they are the agents of Marxism, those who resent reality itself.
They have less pull-ups, less push-ups, slower mile time.
That's something that's due to like your
hold on.
Like, genetics.
Exactly. Yeah, no, but
genetics reflect objective reality. So should we not account for objective reality?
This is affirmative action, right? And so therefore,
there's like fields like I don't think that's a good. One second. I just don't think that's a good example, because like women will never be as strong as men, at least genetically.
So that's an interesting question.
So I think it should be something more like.
So should they be Secret Service agents though? And the answer, I think, should be yes, if they can meet the same standard. But this raises an interesting question. I think there have been either 1 or 2 or 0 female Navy SEALs in the history of Navy SEALs. There was no female Army Rangers except for one case where they let a woman through, but she dropped out very quickly. But on the flip side, there have been 0 men to ever give birth. And I would argue that the bell curve of competence in terms of taking care of kids and old people is completely dominated by women, because they're so much more compassionate and empathetic to people's suffering and potential, personal needs or whatever. So again, we shouldn't complain about any people's genetic proclivity. I happen to be talented at playing the violin. I was not especially talented at playing the piano. Should I have resented my colleagues when I was studying at conservatories? Oh my gosh, you're better at piano than me? I'm literally a victim. We should change the standard so that I can be a pianist too. No, it's ridiculous.
Will women be as good at engineering as men, person for person?
Very good question by Charlie. The answer is no.
Not necessarily, but...
Okay, well then, how is that different than the Secret Service example?
Well, the problem is that...
Very high IQ statement by Charlie.
Because the male mind is wired different than the female mind. By the way...
On average. And see, people will hear that and say, oh my gosh, I can think of an anecdotal example. That is a logical fallacy. Now, I'm stooping down to the mental level of where I think objections could come from. But that is actually probably 80% of the objections, maybe 90% of the objections are that low IQ. Oh my gosh, I can think of a woman that can run faster than a man. Therefore, this is invalid. No, because we're looking at averages, mass levels of statistics which reflect reality. Individual cases, anecdotal cases, literally don't reflect reality. It's why that is rejected in research.
Men will never be as good. Hold on, I'll prove it to you. Men will never be as good at counseling or psychology sessions.
Correct, on average. And the fact that we can think of like men that are super competent at that doesn't mean that that's an invalid statement, because that is a valid statement.
As women, men will never be good at nursing or elementary school education as women. We have certain giftings because our brain is wired a certain way. Women are far better gifted at micro topics.
So that might be an oversimplification, but what I was going to say, because men can hyperfixate on details, is the reason why we're chess champions, etc. But these differences between men and women enrage the left for a reason. And again, that reason is they reflect objective reality. Guys, I want people to understand that what they're at war with is objective reality. And I'm so thankful that so many people are watching this now. Like over 100 people will probably see this video. Thank you again to Charlie Kirk for exposing his audience to me. I hope I can talk to him again soon.
Individual connection, empathetic type
He's definitely right about that.
Conversations, healing people that past trauma and wound. Men are much better at macro topics, right? Trying to build a building,
I saw him talk about this with Michael Knowles in that funny video about drinking, where they were drinking with the yes or no game. And I saw him say this.
Skyscraper up, trying to talk geopolitics. And I'll prove it to you. When you go and you see 5 women eating lunch, they're probably talking about micro topics, conversations they had.
They're talking about what's important to them most precisely, I think.
Relationships, friendships. Yeah. Men, they're talking about politics, sports, or the stock market.
That's not necessarily true.
Oh, yes. You guys all agree, right?
I mean,
any person that pays attention to reality knows that what he's saying is true. Now, I think, you could really get into the details of exactly what men care about when they talk about things. I think that through focus and rigorous, almost irrational dedication to things, men get into details all the time. As a matter of fact, Elon Musk is hyper detail oriented. Every chess champion is hyper detailed oriented. Flight controllers for the space shuttle, hyper detail oriented. In fact, they screen people to be able to have a personality to hyperfixate on a plethora of super important tiny data points. But this all does come in relation, so this is where he's correct, when he says that is in relation to a bigger topic, a more macro topic. And I think this is also why you could make a very coherent argument as to why men have always led societies and why all matriarchs have collapsed and been outcompeted. If you look at human history, every single society has been a patriarch. Every single society since the beginning of time has been men leading. And it's attributable to what he's describing here. I didn't think of that till now.
No, these are bimodal general truths, right? Of course there's exceptions, but
it's not a general truth though. I feel like women have
So she is delusional here at this point.
the capability of having political conversations.
So she's conducting that mental error, that logical fallacy I described called the anecdote.
But it's not the general wiring or nature of women.
It's not. There's no wiring for your brain to like Donald Trump. Like that's not a real thing.
That's false actually. So yeah, just measurably she's incorrect. You can predict people's political affiliation by measuring personality distributions, which we've been able to do for 40 years.
But wait a second. But do you think that men and women are made different in our brains?
Credit to Charlie for circumventing that low IQ error and trying to help her forward anyway.
Certain things, but not necessarily. It doesn't channel you to be a specific thing.
Wrong. Literally incorrect. That statement is ignorant of all personality research.
What things?
Well, there's specific wirings to, producer.
Here we are seeing, ironically, her proving Charlie right in real time by her feminine personality not being able to grasp the objective topics and instead being overly emotional.
Different types of hormones, and that's differences that are genetically.
So you don't think that men are more likely to like contact sports, more likely to enjoy football, UFC, hunting?
I think that's because of a societal norm in general.
Okay, so she's delusional, and she's wearing a MAGA hat, which is why Charlie's like, dude, what's going on right now?
Over a lot of time.
No, come on, you're smarter than that.
Societal norm in general, over a lot of time.
What's interesting is that the delusion of this is predominantly believed in by women. Repeating the objective lie that personality and genetics manifesting themselves as interests and proclivities is socially constructed is measurably false. It's equivalent to saying the sun is 50 million miles away instead of 93 million miles away. And yet they still repeat it because they think that they're protected by an armor of counterfeit virtue, which hypothetically would shield them from objective reality. But the problem is they want to be treated the same as men. If they want to be treated the same as men, they have to be able to adhere to reality like us.
You're smarter than that. That's not true.
Well,
hold on. So why is it
there's women that
So she's emotional right now. He's not going to get her to engage in her higher faculties at this point.
Football. So you can't just
of
say
course,
that.
And there are men that dress in drag, but those are not the general truth of it. So let me just be clear. You think
the average,
that
right?
There's nothing within the female brain in its constitution that makes young ladies more likely.
I mean, being that I'm an engineer, I don't think so. No.
Then she's wrong. At this point, she's just ignorant of psychology.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I feel like there's...
So you think if you pick a random lady here, that they'd be just as comfortable sitting and watching a 4-hour football game than they were to go get their hair done with their best girlfriend?
I want to make an interesting point here. As they're required to lie, see that they're wrong constantly in society, because when they have a family get together, they see that the men like to talk about cars and sports, and, oh, did you see what Elon Musk was doing? Oh, that's so interesting. And the women talk about, how's your boyfriend? How's your family? Oh, those flowers are so pretty, whatever they talk about. I don't really listen to that. They see that happening. But then their ideology requires them to lie in the face of that. So they practice, and I'm being technical when I say the word practice. It's like practicing the violin or practicing getting better at chess. They practice denying reality and constructing a counterfeit narrative to explain why what they're constantly seeing refutes all of their ideological presuppositions. This is the reason why the idea that everything is based on power disparities is so prevalent in these resentful, deformed minds. Because when they see, okay, men are talking about, let's say, sports. We'll take sports as an easy example. Men are talking about sports and women aren't. It's because women are oppressed. The reason why women aren't talking about sports isn't because they don't want to, because they don't find, men bashing into each other with massive shoulder pads interesting. The reason they don't find that interesting is because they've been oppressed when they were children. And if they weren't oppressed when they were children, then they would definitely find sweaty men that are 300 pounds running into each other, fascinating. Again, I articulated the ideology fully there, and it sounded absurd. They never would do that, but that's actually how they sound. And again, that's also why they demonize logic, reason, coherence, because if you were to apply logic, reason, coherence to their ideology like I just did, it's self-evidently absurd and everything disintegrates. But again, she's already admitted that she's delusional here.
I feel like that's kind of diminishing to say, oh, because you're a woman, you will not be able to sit through a 4-hour football field.
Is it diminishing?
Whoa, okay. He didn't say you wouldn't be able to. He said you wouldn't enjoy it. And also, women like this will make terrible mothers. They either have to be cured of this psychopathology or they will make terrible mothers because they will resent every single time their young boys have different interests in their young girls. Very dangerous. We are going to see many examples of this in the next 20 years. Resentful mothers demonizing masculinity of their sons. You're already seeing it in the early 2000s in some cases.
Definition is say a man wouldn't want to go get his hair done? No.
No, I'm sure you get your hair done, right?
Not really. It's like 10 minutes in and out, like barbershop.
Okay, but you still do it.
But the point...
So she is in full denial mode here. This is fully an incompetent female position. And this is interesting because this is an unsolved problem of this century, guys. When you debate women, this ends up happening. And they want to be treated as if they're the same as men when they're not. This is actually a central issue. Because we can't compromise. That's the reason it's a problem. Reality will always reflect its objective parameters, meaning that rationality, reason, and logic will always be favored. Because if you believe false things about how to build a rocket and get to the moon, the rocket will blow up. It won't get to the moon. And if you believe true things, then the rocket will get to the moon. If you believe false things in a game of chess, you will lose the game of chess. And if somebody believes true things about the game of chess, then they will win the game of chess. Reality is objective, but women's minds were not built to grapple with that objectivity, and that might sound toxic or mean, but it is literally the case, and that's fine, because how they were biologically designed to get around that is by interfacing with masculinity, the same way masculinity was designed to interface with femininity to cover its weak points. But feminism has said, men are toxic, men are the enemy, masculinity is oppressive, and so it's demonized women's ability. What it's actually done is it's demonized the apparatus for which women were meant to make sense of the world and to not experience anxiety as a result of not understanding the world. This is the reason why women who are in relationships experience lower rates of anxiety than women who are single, alone, and childless. The most anxious people in the world are always women who are alone, single, and childless. Because really what they're doing is they're constantly suffering at the hands of not understanding reality on a micro level constantly. The fact that this woman has made it to the age of approximately 25 without being able to admit that men find sports more interesting than women on average proves what I'm saying.
Again, there are certain things that women will take more seriously. For example, women will take a lot longer getting ready for the day than men.
On average.
Right?
He should just add the word on average to help her get over this so that she can think of it as a statistical distribution. As an engineer, she should be able to know what a bell curve is.
Why?
Because we're held to higher standards to
No,
look pretty.
no.
For example, your hair. How short is your hair? It's super short. Mine, it's gonna take longer to
This
drop.
is so delusional, dude.
Do you wear
Right?
makeup?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you want to look pretty, and it takes.
Yeah, that's not important to me because I'm a man.
But that just is how we're different.
certain reason.
Well, but you wouldn't feel comfortable wearing makeup?
I can not wear makeup.
But why do you do it?
So he's dude. This is so low resolution. She's in full denial mode here. But the fact she doesn't realize what's going on, as this is like painfully pathetic. And the reason she isn't being bullied right now is because she's a woman. So ironically, she's proving herself wrong. If this was a guy saying this stuff, all the other dudes would already be laughing at her, just completely laughing at him, mocking him, etc.
I mean, like right now I'm not wearing like anything really.
No, I know, but that's the point, is that at some point you wear makeup because there's something within your wiring that says, I want to be presentable to the world, and that wiring honestly is, I want to find a mate to have children.
This question was about affirmative action. I think we're...
This is really interesting. I think the internet this century is going to really put a lot of average IQ degenerate females to shame, because people like me can watch this. Even people that are standard deviation and more intelligent than her can watch this, and we can all realize how delusional ideology commands people to be. The internet's still so new that this phenomenon hasn't been fully recognized in society and culture. I'm sort of just thinking in parallel to this, like how interesting it is that not only can I listen to Elon Musk talk, I can also listen to this girl talk on the internet. Bizarre, really.
No, it's not. It's actually really important, because I don't think there's any differences between races, but I think that when it comes to affirmative action, we're saying that there are differences.
Right.
That we're trying to say that things that don't matter should matter. So I don't think...
Yeah, and it was very narcissistic of her to pretend as though she can just reframe the topic, when the reason the topic got to the point where it is because Charlie had to progressively go down level after level after level when she failed to grasp every single concept and basic premise that he was putting forward.
Race matters. Affirmative action says race does
matter. What
matter.
about like women also in fields like that? Like what I explained earlier.
I think that's even more dangerous, to be honest with you. If we're going to say that women should be Secret Service agents protecting Trump.
Not secret.
Right, making reality in the image of delusion is catastrophic.
Service. I'm talking about medicine, engineering, that type of thing.
Well, hold on. Okay, so should we try...
Selecting for anything other than competence is catastrophic.
To have this...
And results in the degradation and inevitable collapse of the enterprise and domain.
Same amount of female to male OBGYNs.
I think it should be similar to the amount of like...
OBGYNs.
The general population.
So, hold on. 85% of all OBGYNs are female.
Yeah.
So now should we have parity so that men...
I have an OBGYN that's a man. That's not a problem.
Oh my gosh, the same logical fallacy was conducted again. This girl claims to be an engineer. What is going on, dude? What?
So now should we have parity so that men?
I have an
I mean, this is simple, isn't it? This is super simple.
OBGYN that's a man. That's not a problem.
That's not the point. The
How
point is,
how is that her response?
should we have parity?
I think it should be similar to like whatever the.
Got it. Okay. So you're consistent. So women studying in the OBGYN field will be actively discriminated against. So a man
Right, exactly.
can, because we must have parity.
It's not about people in the OBGYN specifically. It's about people.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because you're advocating for this.
In general, men were like, for example, women were not able to vote until like less than 100 years ago, basically, right?
What does that have to do with?
One second. So because of that, a lot of the laws, a lot of everything that's set in place was made by men, was excluding women, was creating.
And now we see that your contribution is wanting to make the world in the image of a degenerate, incoherent ideology which fundamentally is at war with truth and being able to execute your babies. These are the two most important confessed positions. And when I say confessed, I think there's a lot more dark and sinister motivations that aren't confessed, yet you see manifested in only the most fringe and radical extremes of the hijacked feminine personality. But you have to wonder why every society since the beginning of time was a patriarch. Every single society since the beginning of time was run and led by men.
like reforms and like certain legislations that would specifically, support men rather than women because women don't have that ability.
Or support society. I don't think it was always about supporting.
Well, for
men.
example, like what about it? Like what I brought up, endometriosis, or like the seatbelt accident, like all this stuff is due because we tend to favor men in specific.
Well, so I just don't believe that. First of all, because
I mean,
research
I
will go
can
where the money
show
is.
you.
And so if there was money in endometriosis research?
Not much because
Well,
men
that's
don't
why.
care.
So maybe it wasn't sexism. Maybe it was a monetary explanation.
Well, who has the money in a society?
Well, actually,
What is, dude, she actually has no idea what she's talking about.
women control more money than men in the country.
But men, women weren't able to have bank accounts until like less than 100 years ago, so they can't really
What is she talking about, bro? Now, look, I know that there's a lot of women in the comments. Inevitably, they're going to be like mocking this, right? Like a lot. Actually, it's mostly dudes. Okay, whatever. But I can imagine, the average conservative girl like pulling her hair out, being like, "I have an account at Bank of America." Like, this woman's delusional, bro. But to that girl that's, has an intact brain, I say to you, you have to confront this because this is a serious problem that has to be overcome this century. Resentment for objective reality. This is what I've said to people before. This is a very important topic. Resentment for reality is needless because reality is impersonal. This is the reason why if somebody makes a better argument than me, I never take it personally and I can learn things very rapidly. Or a better example would be if you have a chess coach. Do you take it personally if he says, this is a better way of playing chess, and then is able to explain why it's a better way of playing chess? Or maybe you just trust him because he's a lot better at chess than you. You don't take that personally, you just get better at chess. You see what I'm saying? And the very few people in the population, with the example of chess, that are men that would take that advice personally, they get better so slowly because they're not able to integrate the objective understanding of the system that they're essentially irrelevant, and they're also scorned and mocked mercilessly by other men in the domain of competence. So all the other men that play chess would look at this guy and be like, can you believe this loser? He's not listening to the master's advice. You can apply this to martial arts. You can apply this to violin. You can apply this to literally any domain of competence. Reality, objectivism is impersonal. It has nothing to do with you. So just integrate it and get over it. It's to me, it's foreign, but to a lot of emotional people, they can't seem to connect these dots.
Build that generational wealth.
Do you think it's been a better thing with women's liberation in the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, I would
Do you think, that's interesting. Do you think women are happier in America today than they were 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Then why are they the most depressed group in
Then why are they not? Oh, that's really funny framing. That's
the history of
because he's right. It's funny though.
the species?
That's good.
Women are the most miserable they've ever been.
Yeah.
Like, why is that?
I don't think that's because we're allowed to have money.
No,
now,
I'm asking but it's like more liberation, more college degrees, more birth.
Because they've become more disconnected with the apparatus of connecting them with reality, which is masculinity, as masculinity has been demonized as oppressive and untenable reflections of reality. It's no surprise that all these people that are radically leftist are always triggered with displays and signs of masculinity. And they're enraged by it, they're triggered by it, they can't stand it in any format. Because masculinity was the evolutionary device that allowed women to decrease their anxiety and make sense of the world.
control, less marriage,
I would
less
argue
kids.
otherwise. I don't know where you got that data.
No,
like, we're
everybody
more
agrees that
depressed.
women are super miserable, like as far as versus 30 years ago.
Well, it could be the fact that because women weren't able to go to like a psychologist or like.
So yeah, delusional. She's just ignorant. At this point, she's just factually wrong, given our understanding of psychology.
Or
Before-
maybe it's because they're not doing the one thing that
She's
antidepressant use 2024. It is
Well,
the highest it has ever
but
been.
there's like more layers to it than that. It can't just be that. You have
Is
to
there?
look at why are women more likely to go and talk to a psychologist. There's the differences in that.
So, but I'm just curious. So, do you think women
So
are?
she's denied reality on every level here. She shouldn't be wearing a MAGA hat. Obviously, she's surrounded by a lot of people, including some women who completely disagree with her and can tell how she's wrong. So I don't want to paint this as a picture of being hopeless, but this is a very serious issue because she is exhibiting the spirit of resentment, the essence of reality denial that defines the left. I really appreciate all of you watching. I found this very interesting. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. You know what? I'd be very interested to hear if you guys have had any real life encounters or examples where a woman has done something like this, said incompetent things, because those stories are always very interesting to me. So you can leave that in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next video.